Ion Radio. I'm going to see if chat can hear me, and then we'll proceed. As you can see, I'm in a new location. So all of my stuff has now transitioned over, so I had to unplug and replug everything in, and sometimes things just don't like working. So if you can hear me in chat, let me know. And then we can get on with this. Let's see what today is. Today is Monday, October 25th. And we're going to be discussing episode Season 2, 6. And I'm going to be going over my thoughts on Trench. Or, in other words, very controversial, why I really don't like Trench. Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. You sound quiet. I could just move my mic. Is that a little bit better? And I have pop-ups all over my screen. Okay, so today we're going to discuss a little bit about Trench. So I'm going to read Trench. I'm going to talk about my general thoughts on him, how he compares to other commanders that are like him for the point range, because he's quite expensive. And then, spoiler, I'm not a huge fan of him, but mileage may vary. Okay, so here is Admiral Trench. So he's actually one of my favorite Clone Wars commanders. Any better? No? Okay. Yeah, it just with everything moving around, I actually just put my computer today a couple hours ago. So it might just need to be adjusted internally. So I'll work on that hopefully for next time. Okay, so Admiral Trench reads, at the start of each ship phase, you may reveal and discard one command dial from this card. If you can see here, he starts with 4 command dials set when his ship is deployed. If you do, until the end of the round, when a friendly ship spends only a matching command token to resolve a command, that ship resolves the command as if it had spent a dial and a token of the same type instead. 36 points. So when you think about it, this sounds like a super, super powerful card. You're like, it's like Thrawn, but a little bit more. And I'm going to tell you why I actually like Thrawn far better than I like Trench. So you have to have already planned and have a token on the ship for it to function. So you need lots of token generation cards. Otherwise, you're just converting your commands over to tokens and then using it as a token dial later on, which is fine. You can plan it. Like when Ken used it, I don't even know if it was during the season. It might have been right when the Clone Wars released and we're still doing just numbered episodes. But he used it mainly for concentrate fire, and what he would do is he would reveal on his ship a concentrate fire, turn it into a token, and then when he went to shoot, changed the token with Trench then into a token dial. And for me, like, I don't think he used a reroll once because, Ken dice. But I don't know if that's really a good use for him. So you need like your ships that you want to be doing the extra commands, and then you need ships that are feeding those extra tokens to those ships. So it's very much you need a lot of working parts to work together to get it to function. And he costs 36 points, which is at like that upper tier level of what commanders cost. So I'm already struggling to get what I want in a fleet with like General Grievous for 20 points. So you tack on 16 extra points from that, it makes it a big challenge. So now I'm going to discuss each command and my thoughts on using Trench in that regards. So comparing him again to Thrawn, because points and same reveal dial to gain dial type of situation. Thrawn is extremely good at Squadrons, and he's also extremely good at concentrate fire. You don't see Thrawn being used as much for navigation or using him as engineering. So you mainly see Thrawn as if you're flying ships only, concentrate firing, or you see Thrawn as in a fighter build doing squadrons because he works across everything. which is great because then you can have all your ships doing other things like navigating to get into position and concentrating fire to trigger other cards or saving up tokens, and then still being able to use a full squadron because he takes less work to do. You only get 3, but you really only need 3 because when you think about it, most of the time true combat starts turn 3. Turn 1, you're just moving forward. Turn 2, you're setting up. There might be a few shots. Squadrons might start engaging, but for the most part, most combat takes place over 3 and 4. Spills into turn 5 if there's anything left, and then turn 6 as you're like doing shots at long range. I just totally double dabbed without even realizing it. Long range to clean up ships. So you really only need 2, maybe 3 dials. Trench gives you 4, but each one you have to plan ahead to collect those tokens. So let's look at Navigate. All the CIS ships are decently maneuverable. So you have first the hard cell. The hard cell has that standard, basically a click in every position until you get to 3, and then it only has 2, which is standard. So when you do a nav with it, if it's a nav token, you should have enough control that you can get where you need to be. So you don't necessarily need to jump from speed 1 to speed 3 or speed 3 down. Usually you're trying to accelerate at the end. So Trench is allowing you to do a token and a navigate might not necessarily be useful for a hard sell. Especially because if you really needed to do it, you could just do a dial and then you get the extra click. So that's my opinion on the hard sell. The Munificent is already the most like maneuverable speed 2 ship. So you're not really going to be needing to jump from... You could go from speed 0 to 2, cool, but again, like even if you add the thing, then you have like clicks on everything, so it's not as useful for that ship. Then we go to the Recusant, which is you're either going slow and it's decently maneuverable, or you're going speed 3 and it's super maneuverable. It's one of the most maneuverable ships at speed 3. Then you have the Providence, and the only really bad maneuver for it is speed 3, but it really shouldn't be going speed 3 unless you're using it just as a battering ram, and then it's going to die anyway, so you don't really need to slow down or do anything with that. So for the most part, I'm not going to use Trench to try to navigate, because getting the token dial, very rarely is a token dial with navigate actually needed, especially if you look across the CIS ships and their maneuverability as a whole. So I'm not using Trench for that. Then we're going to go into Squadrons. And I don't like using tokens to do his effect with Squadrons. And so that's the same thing related to Thrawn. When I'm using Thrawn dials for Squadrons, my dedicated carriers, which would usually be a Quasar in this instance with Thrawn, they're still doing Squadrons. Because if something terrible were to accidentally happen to Thrawn, I don't want to try to rely on the fact that the only Squadron dials that I have are my Thrawn dials. So my Quasar are usually, it's like turn 1, oh, here's a navigate, store it, I'm going speed 2, so I'm just slowly inking around the battlefield. And then the rest of it's Squadrons. So with Thrawn, I just take 1 and I turn it into a token, and then I get a token effect with it. But that's it. And then as soon as Thrawn dials are out, I don't have to think, oh, did I already plan a squadron? No, I have the rest of the game all Squadrons, because the Quasar is only going to do Squadrons because I'm a Squadron build. So I'm going to be doing Squadrons every turn. Trench allows you to do a Squadron and a token. So let's do some quick math, though, on this. Most fighter builds end up being between 6 for CIS to 10 fighters. So we'll go on the extreme end of it that you have 10 fighters. So if you're looking at a dial token effect to push all of your ships, we have a Providence that does 4, which turns into 5 out of the 10 fighters. And then you have a Munificent that should be 3, which turns into 4. So now you're at 9. And then let's say you have a hard sell or any other ship there, you are now over commanding your Squadrons with all of your ships. If you just did Squadrons with your ships, you're at 4, 3, and then you have 2 from your hard sell. So if you did Squadrons across the board on all of your ships, you would have an exact amount for all of your Squadrons before they start dying. So for the most part, like my head, like the extra steps to get that 1 token across all of your ships if you're a Squadron build doesn't necessarily make sense. So That combined with I'll need to have a token, and let's pretend that then Trench is killed, and I'm relying on Trench to turn that token into a dial token. Then I'm kind of really out of luck because now I get 1 instead of whatever I was supposed to get. So it's a real risk reward to think that it's going to be a squadron builder. So now we're going to move into Concentrate Fire. And for the most part, I see Concentrate Fire as, I think I've talked about it before when we talked about commands, as not necessarily necessary or a good thing for bigger ships. CIS has a lot of ships that actually want to add an extra dial in, or a dial, extra dice in, like Munificence, like 3 reds to 4 reds. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good trade. But like your bigger ships, they might want to navigate to position themselves, so front arc or side arc or whatever is in better line of sight in positioning than necessarily just adding 1 dice in, or using squadrons and throwing a group of squadrons forward or bombers to bomb. It's a better offensive output to do those commands than it is to do Concentrate Fire. Concentrate Fire should be mainly reserved for triggering abilities like, Gunnery Team, but for the most part, CIS isn't using Gunnery Team. And honestly, I think the only one that I really consider using Gunnery Team on is the Recusant. And again, it's just going to try to maneuver. Excuse me. And so I probably wouldn't use him for Concentrate Fire. So that moves us on to engineering. He is great for engineering because you can have parts resupply, throw out tokens to all your ships, and then those tokens can become a dial and a token to heal yourself. So CIS already have a lot of cards that synergize with engineering commands like Wat-Tambor and droid parts, whatever, when you can flip things down faster. So he is really just an engineering commander, and he's really expensive to do that, especially because most of the time only 1 ship at a time is going to be taking damage. So you're going to have 4 turns that you're going to spend him theoretically with engineering or whatever thing you are, and you're probably only going to get 1 ship effect for 36 points. You might as well just use a tactical droid for that. So now let's compare him to commanders that are already in faction. Grievous, 20 points. He's cheap, so in and of itself, his cheapness is a benefit to himself. You save 16 points over Trench. Then you have his ability to gain tokens back, which makes you more tanky, because using your tokens to salvo the opponent, redirect to other shield groups, and to half damage with braces if they don't get accuracies is more beneficial than trying to heal yourself back up, because you just would rather mitigate the damage than try to heal the damage, because healing the damage, things can go wrong and your engineering can be half by a crit, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna die. So Grievous outperforms staying alive. Then you have Kraken, and you have Martuk. So that's going back into the Concentrate Fire. Martuk is pretty much an automatic Concentrate Fire with any ship that you're shooting with at any range, without having to be a Concentrate Fire. And if it's a ship that already wants to be a Concentrate Fire, now it's 2. Trench gives you an extra dice and a reroll. Then you go to Kraken, who you can Concentrate Fire with, and then you can use Kraken's ability to just change the dice to whatever you want, which is better than using a token to reroll. And then Dooku is just, I don't really care, you can't do what you want to do, and I'm going to continue doing what I want to do. So kind of in my head, like, every single commander in the CIS faction, for what the CIS have, which is how their ships function, what you're probably going to be using as a fighter screen, and how many ships you have, probably all the other commanders are better. That's my hot take on Trench. You can throw in your comments what your thoughts are, and I'll get to it in a second. But like, for the most part, I can really only logically want to do engineering with him, and I still think I could do engineering and other shenanigans with other commanders a little bit better. So he doesn't protect your ship like Thrawn does from like slicer tools, for example, because slicer tools with Thrawn. That's one of the reasons why he was so powerful in the meta that like 2-ship existed in and things like that. Because a slicer tool will come in and say, you can't squadron. And then you're like, oh no, I'll Thrawn anyway, and I'll just use my Quasar as a squadron. And really, raid's not a thing, so you're not going to get raided with squadrons, so you can't do Thrawn anyway, and anyway, you can just reveal and do it. But you have to like have other ships doing the commands to pass the commands as tokens, or just delaying a turn and doing this weird, like, I don't use it as a squadron dial, I take it as a token, and then I'm going to use the token and do it. It just seems like really extra steps to get very, very minimum amount of reward for how much he costs. And now that I've angered the internet, I'm going to take a look at the comments and answer some questions, and we'll break into the game. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I'm really excited about the move. I'm hoping this weekend I can get my studio back up and running. I have an electrician coming to add more outlets, because right now I only have like one outlet in my basement, and that's just totally not going to be enough for what I want to do in it. Honestly, I kind of like revealing a dial, using it as a token, then using Trench ability, but I'm still trying to figure it out. Yeah, I'm just not sold on that. Like, I guess it works, but I just feel like the other commanders I can use better to do almost the same effect for cheaper. Yeah, Ken, thanks. It was right after we got the Providence. That's true. Yeah, you did that right after the Providence. Trench abilities plus the ship's dial plus T-Series can let a ship do 3 dial effects in 1 power turn. I haven't pulled it off yet, but I want to. So at an undisclosed time, I used to be able to do that very, very efficiently. That 3 dial in a turn is quite fun, except it's very, very hard to do due to the costs and then having to get so many tokens. And the CIS faction as a whole does not like giving out tokens. They like taking tokens for themselves, but they don't pass tokens. They don't share. They're very greedy, which is the CIS. I can see Trench work well in a double pickle fleet to turn it into a super tank fleet. So still the challenge with the double pickle type fleet with Trench is you still need the tokens. So you still need another ship possibly to be passing them tokens like a hard sell on top of the double pickle. And then you're running into like this point crunch of, do you have enough points to actually get everything on? Because when I fully deck out a pickle, I'm like at like 200 points plus a commander. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of points for something that doesn't have a lot of hull. Why don't you like squads with Trench? I got in late. So to summarize it real fast, it comes down to how many squadrons you're going to be deploying, David. And on average, it's going to be 6 to 10. So you're going to still need minimum of like 2 to 3 ships to activate all those squadrons. And Trench, with his ability, will over-activate all the squadrons instead of just activating them all properly. I went into a decent explanation about it probably right before you came in about the count. So maybe just go back when the video is done and review that. I just think he overplays it for how much shenanigans you have to do to go into it. So, like, if you had any other commander, you would have 16 extra points. And if you really, 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 really wanted to have that extra 1 squadron that he gives you, put expanded hangars on 3 ships. That's 15 points, and you save yourself a point. And then you just do squadrons with those ships. There's just so many better options than his point tax to do something just marginally better. Jumping through hoops for a little gain at 36 points. Maybe in an 800-point game it might work, but bust. Then again, Tarkin does it better. Yeah, no, like, looking at it in a small little window of 400 points, yes. At 800 points, then yeah, he totally becomes really viable because it's that ramp up effect of getting more things across the board. You then should have enough support ships to pass it to your bigger ships, and then your bigger ships are going to be using his effect, which is the same thing with like how Akbar scales. Both Tarkin scale. Sato even scales better at higher points and things like that. Like a lot of the more expensive commanders scale better at bigger games, But Trench at 400 points, it's a hard task to get enough use out of that 36 points you're investing when you can do other things inside faction that almost do the exact same effect. Like all the other commanders you can, like if you do concentrate fire, the other commanders are better, Kraken and Martuk, because then you can still do other things and they're still doing an ability. Grievous has really risen on my like list, since you can intentionally fly your fighters off the board, because then you can just auto trigger him, and it doesn't matter if you're second player using any infested fields or the like, to be pretty tanky. But that's my opinion. So let's now break into, sorry, I have to look on the side of the screen, our last match. Okay, so this is the wrong one. Here it is. Okay, so here's our two fleets. And we have Plokun versus Trench. So while we've been talking about Trench, we'll just talk about my fleet real fast. I have 3 ships and a bunch of squadrons. Here is a Providence Dreadnought. I have the Dreadnought version, mainly because I want the 2 turbo laser slots. Admiral Trench is on this one. I have Watambor because if I've already talked about how I'm going to be using Trench as engineering, so we're going to just double down and this thing's not going to die. That's my goal. It has local fire control because who needs a contain when you can get a salvo? And if you're going to be building a salvo Providence, then flat guns is really good because then you're throwing more dice at longer range. Point defense ion cannons, if you want to get close to me, you're going to have to reroll. So it kind of nerfs fighters. And a lot of black dice crits, which is fine because I'm tossing my contain. Then I have the DBY827 heavy turbo lasers, which says that if my black dice doesn't come up as a double, I'm going to turn it into a double anyway. And then I also have linked turbo laser towers because I really enjoy rerolling my reds because they hate me. And then like it links into your salvo, so it's just great. You roll your dice. It's a red blank, it's a blue hit, and it's a black blank. And then you're like, I'm going to re-roll that red. It's a hit. And then I'm going to turn the black into a double. So then here you can have 4 damage on salvo every single time. So that's pretty awesome. So this is basically a lot of points. And I'm point fortressing it. And you have to come try to shoot me. And if you shoot me, I'm going to shoot you back almost as hard as you're going to shoot me unless you have like an ISD. So this is actually probably one of my favorite ways to run a Providence. And Trench allows me then to use the Trench ability, as much as I just talked badly on Trench, but this is how I use him. You can use him to get engineering tokens passed to him. And then he can trigger engineering while doing other things like navigate or squadrons in this instance, because it's a squadron carrier. My next ship is a Munificent Comms frigate with Tikis and linked turbo laser towers, because it should just be printed on the backside of the Munificent card. Teaks allows me an ability to generate tokens, which I will be using to help trigger Trench. And this is where I started talking about how there's an added cost to Trench on top of his 36 points, because I'm now spending, well, it's not a lot for this ship, but 2 extra points on this ship of something that I might not necessarily do to try to gain tokens so that I can try to trigger Trench. Or just gain, you know, a token that I need here and there. Last one is a hard sell. It's a transport, and it has parts resupply to seed the board with engineering tokens so I can use Trench. Normally I prefer CommsNet, because then I can choose what I'm passing, but if I'm just, you know, going all in on engineering, I might as well just use engineering and pass it along. Then I have fighters. I have my standard tri-fighter grouping, which I really, really like. I got the flak, I got Dis, and I have 6 tri-fighter squadrons. So that brings us up to, apparently I have 2 flaks. That's my clicking for Trench. So that's a total of 8 squadrons. So let's go back real fast. Providence is 4. If I use it for Trench, I'm at 5. so that means I still have to use another one. And my Munificent is 3, and that brings me up to 4, so now I'm at 9. So I like overshoot it. I'd rather just slightly undershoot it and use my hard sell to also do Squadrons than the shenanigans of having to try to maneuver to get tokens when I'm going to be over-activating my Squadrons anyway. Especially because they're Tri-Fighters, they're 3 health, they're going to die very, very fast. So I don't need more, I need the minimum amount to activate the first turn. And then from there on, it's going to decrease how many fighters I'm going to be activating. So that's my thought on that. All the parts that are here, I really can't change because of point limit for what I'm trying to do with Trench. So, like, what would I say that I would improve this list by? Not really much. I really wouldn't change anything because I built the Providence exactly how I wanted it because this is the type of Providence that I wanted. And then Munificent, I have like an upgrade on it that's automatic, and then I brought Teaks. And then I brought a hard cell with 1 upgrade on it to pass out tokens. Like, there's not a lot of changes, and then just these fighters. These are the fighters that I prefer. They did not really help me in the way that I normally bring them. I bring them because they have decent anti-squadron. They have counters, so I just don't immediately die without giving away some hits or attempted hits. And they have black dice against ships. My black dice didn't decide to show up. I had some terrible luck with shooting at ships in this game. But for the most part, I prefer that than all the other CIS, even like the double red bombers. It just misses. So I would rather have the anti-squadron with counter than vultures or hyenas in this case. Okay, so now on to Ken's fleet. It is a Plokun powered by an Acclamator. It's an Acclamator 1. It has Plokun, Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka Tano is actually one of my favorite cards for the Republic. It directly counters what I brought, which is the Tri-Fighters, which you'll see a lot of because Tri-Fighters are amazing. But giving the Gar snipe 3 times allows you to do exactly what Ken did in this, which was kill pretty much all of my Tri-Fighters from range so that he didn't take any counter damage, which stunk for me because then I didn't do enough damage so that I could flak it down the rest of the fighters because his fighters are actually pretty bulky in health. Flight controllers. I've also talked about this before. I think out of all of the factions, flight controllers is mandatory for the Republic. And that's because most of their fighters, as we'll see, I'll point it out when we get to the fighters, have a red dice and it's anti-squadron, which I just count as being no dice. So then they have 2 blues and a red, so 2 dice. That's how I count it in damage. And that also pairs really well with Ahsoka because Ahsoka is a pre, and then flight controllers is like an add right at the end, so you can get up to 4 snipe, which is pretty juicy when you only need 3 damage to kill a Tri-Fighter or like a TIE Interceptor or things like that. It just eats them. Or an A-Wing, like you could theoretically roll perfectly and kill an A-Wing in 1 shot, which is always fun at snipe range. Then we have flat guns. Flat guns, I think I wouldn't include in this list because this is primarily a squadron pusher. I would have probably gone with some other offensive retrofit, maybe like expanded hangars, or I think isn't reserve one of these slots too. I think that would be a bit more beneficial. Throwing a black dice at media range is nice, but for the most part, you don't want them shooting at your flagship, especially with Plo Koon's ability to do what he does with bombers and anti-squadron. Boosted comms, so you're reaching farther out. That's one of the reasons why I don't think flat guns is as good, because you're trying to reach out and activate your squadrons farther away. And if you're reaching out to activate them farther and farther away because you don't want someone shooting you, so don't bring flat guns. Swivel mount doesn't hurt. It means that you just point yourself at the enemy and then you throw extra dice at longer range. So, yep. Next ship, it's a Counselor Charger C-70. It has Clone Navigational Officer, which I imagine is there to pass tokens to the Acclamator. It has Radiant 7 and it has CommsNet. So this is fun because you can just throw tokens out all over the place. Yeah, this is how, if I were, every time I fly a counselor and make it Radiant 7, I like doing this Clone Navigational Officer and CommsNet. It's just a fun combo. And then you have a Pelta Medical Frigate with Bomber Command Center and FB-88. I know Ken prefers FB-88, and I prefer, don't quote me on the title. Hold on. It's the other one. I just need to get over to it. It is the Pelta title, and it is not wanting to load. I'll add that in. It is TB73, and that's the one that gives you an additional evade. I prefer that one. Ken prefers this one, but I think that has a lot to do with our philosophy of what we do as commands. I pretty much know what my ship I want to be doing the whole time, so I don't necessarily need to scratch a plan and change the dial. A lot of times what Ken will do is he'll give the first dial of his first choice, and then he'll do the second dial of the second choice that he wants, and then you would just pick whichever one he actually needs at the time, which is a good way how to do it. That's just not how I normally function in picking commands, so I'm not going to change the way I pick commands just for a title. That's just me. That's not a dig on Ken. That's just the way he plays it. I prefer having the extra evade because my ships die at longer range, and I would rather cancel more dice. Bomber Command's very useful, especially for what Ken's bringing, which we will get to his fighter complement in another slide. Then he has a Counselor class armed cruiser, which has reactive gunner on it, which means that contain that's pretty much useless on this ship becomes, hey, I'm going to shoot you with a blue dice, and it's kind of funny. And I like funny, so I like that ship. Now we get to the juicy part, his squadron build. And while I like flying Y-Wings, Ken prefers flying ARC 170s, and I think he showed really good effect of how good that can be with flight controllers and Ahsoka, because they're slow, but snipe means that they're now shooting as far as they're moving, which is pretty cool. So there's a Delta 7 because Plokun really likes to have at least one squadron with Adept in it so that he can allow squadrons to move around with grit. Oddball moves in and he can reroll his dice after moving, which works well with Ahsoka if you're attacking squadrons because he has the 3 preferred dice, which then can be turned into snipe, which then can be added to for flight controller, and then he can reroll them after moving. And then he also has 2 bombers, so if he's not there, you move, you attack a ship, place a Plo dice, block their tokens, and if you don't have anything, you can just re-roll them. And then if you still don't have anything, Bomber Command says you can re-roll them again. And he's bombers, so you're basically just trying to roll out of accuracies. Really good. Then you have 3 ARC 170s, and now if you look over here, right here, see this? This is 2 attack dice and a red. So 2 blues and a red. Ahsoka makes it actually useful and turns that red dice into a useful blue dice at snipe range with this, which is pretty nice. They have a lot of hull, so they don't die immediately, and they have counter. So they're annoying to kill. And with Ahsoka, like, you can just slowly be moving forward and sniping because they're slow, kill off all the fighter screen, and then move in and bomb with Plo Koon with Bomber Command. It's a really good group. And then you have your V-19s, 3 of them, and they have escort to try to keep your arcs alive so they can do that longer. And then they also have this, 2 attack dice and then a red, which then Ahsoka turns into 3 useful blue dice plus another one for flight controllers. So that's pretty good. And they also have a black dice. So with Plo Koon, that means you get an accuracy to block out the redirect, and hopefully you roll a hit. That's a free hit that goes exactly where you want it, either right into the hull or right into the shield zone that you want it to be in. That's the fleet. So really the only thing I would say I would change is I would change out flat guns or go for a bid. I'm not a big fan of flat guns on acclimators, but that's my preference. Mileage may vary, and also F88 for the other one. FB73. So that is that. Now let's see. I want to talk about objective choice and then look at comments if you have any questions about the builds or what I'm ranting about, and then you can make a comment now, and then I'll get into how the game actually played out. So, what? This is my objective choice. Surprise attack. Never saw that before. Contested outposts and superior positions. This is my standard, and there's a reason for it because these are all good. As you saw, Ken kind of mopped the floor with my squadrons and killed some ships of mine, and I still won because I had a contested outpost. Surprise attack is really, really bad for Ken because he's trying to be a squadron build, and I'll hit his ships that are trying to navigate around with nav raid, and then I'd hit the ships that are trying to command squadrons with squadron raid. So he's not going to be able to do what he wants if he picks that objective, and then I get to choose where his flagship goes, and then I get to try to kill it where it is. Surprise attack is why it's there. Contested outpost, like I said, I could just slow roll an engineering fleet and sit on it and gain points. 120 points over 6 turns is a lot, and that's really what won me this game. And then you have superior positions, which is if you don't have fighters, my tri-fighters are going to just jump behind you and I can just earn points. On top of what's more important than earning points is the fact that you have to deploy your fleet first, and then I, which have a engineering I want to stay alive fleet, can pick anywhere on the battlefield that I want to be at, and then I get to choose where we're engaging. So that's why I choose these 3 objectives. Ken chose contested outpost, which means that he knows where I am. And I think that's important because his arcs are very, very slow. But whenever you pick this objective, you kind of have to choose, can I kill enough of you to negate the fact that you're going to get 120 points? Or can I contest outpost, the outpost long enough that you're not going to get the benefit that you need? And it's going to be really, really hard when I'm sitting a flak salvo, all these terms, they're all basically the same. A salvo Providence right on top of the station. So you have to come kill me. Otherwise, I just get the points. So that's it. So I'm going to look at chat. Again, throw comments in, and then we'll go over the whole course of the game. Okay, I actually might have to scroll. That's pretty cool. I don't know. Maxwell, jumping through hoops for a little gain at 36 points, maybe an 800. I did read that one. Cool. Problem is most games are played at 400, just doesn't seem good. Well, the thing about the 400 points is that there's this concept in board games in general about choices. And the more choices that you have to make, for the most part, make a more interesting game. And Ken and I have talked about it, like 500 points would be a lot of fun, but that's because you get to have everything. You can have all your ships, you can have all your upgrades, and you can have all your squadrons all at the same time. In designing a fleet at 500 points is easy because you can have it all. What 400 points forces you to do is it forces you before the game to already have deep, hard choices that you've made in designing and what you're bringing. And because you're able to make those choices beforehand, it actually makes it easier to balance then, because you can't just bring everything. Because if you could bring every single fighter help in like a Rebel list or an Imperial list or any of the lists, because there's a lot of card depth in there. Like if you could bring every single squadron helping, then your squadrons would just be amazing. But having to choose carefully like what actual upgrades you can have, I think is part of the course of the game and why 400 points is what it is. While the bigger games are a lot of fun, they take a lot more time. And again, you have like all of your things that you need and what you really want because you have the point space for it, which then takes away from part of that list building need. Like what I enjoy about the game is like trying to list build and make a list efficient or make it do a specific thing, because when it can just do everything, then it just does everything and you lose part of the fun of the game. That's my opinion on that. I just finished Ewok running Trench and 1 support Recusant and 1 unit and can activate all 8 of my squadrons very efficiently while still granting me a ton of flexibility on my normal dials. So David, how do you get your squadron tokens to all your ships reliably then for 4 turns? That's just my question for that. And that's the reason why I don't like Trench, is because I have to have other things giving me tokens for it. So, but like I said, mileage may vary. I don't like him as a commander, but that doesn't mean that everyone else can't like him as well. Like, I like Sato. Most people don't like Sato because Sato's terrible, but man, I would just play around making a Sato fleet all day long, hoping one day it will be good. It went through a point change and errata in a different version of the game, and he's still not good, and I still want to try to play him. Okay, are you going to do any more big games like 1200 you did? Well, we do have other big games coming out. I can't necessarily say it's going to be 1200 points because that is gruelingly long to film and insanely difficult to edit. But we do have, at the end of each season, something big planned. So I'm excited to show you guys what we did for season 2. Hopefully you like it. I'm not going to spoil anything else besides that, but there are big games that are coming. That would be cool. Or homeschool clone campaign. Yeah, there's talk about it. I think Ken's playing online Clone Wars era game with some people from our Discord. You can talk about that with them. So back to Max. Exactly, John. You have to spend an extra amount of points on support upgrades to get Trench to work. Too pricey for 400-point matches. Yeah, that's really what I'm going for. And you can spend the points from Trench to buy the upgrades to pretty much get Trench effect without Trench. And then you get the effect of the other commander, which is usually better than whatever the effect they were going to get from Trench was. And then everyone, yes, it's TB73. I should have really just looked over. It took me longer than... I thought I was going to do it in less than 10 seconds because that's usually the delay. And then it took me extra long because my phone didn't want to work. Yeah, Ken did very well with Squadrons in this game, and he was first player, which the first player, Ahsoka Alpha Strike in, just wrecks counter Squadrons, which put me really on the back foot. And I'd have to go back and rewatch the episode myself, but when I chose to not engage his Squadrons, I'll get to that. I'll just get to that in a second. I'll come back to that when we talk about the game. Just remind me. Maybe you can choose other objectives and be more fair to Ken. I'm being very fair to Ken because if you were to go anywhere else and play anyone else, these are the exact objectives that he would play. It makes no sense to choose objectives that are bad for your fleet or that don't work really well for your fleet. Or he could outbid me and make me choose his, which can happen too. But hopefully before this season's done, I'll be able to give you guys my look on objectives, and I'll break down exactly why I choose objectives and how I think of objectives. I have the rough draft done. I just haven't had time with the move yet to take pictures so I can best explain it to all of you. Rune Hackor on the Munificent and Teeks on the Recusant, but totally fair personal preference. Also have Bomber Command Hard Cell for the third activation. Okay, yeah, I actually like Rune. You'll see me use him decently in an upcoming game. He does allow you to steal tokens from other ships, but you still have to have those tokens on other ships to really affect him. So you get 2 out of him, and then I guess you could steal other ones from the hard cell, but you might as well just comms net it. It just becomes this token economy that the CIS does not do well. GAR, really good at token economy because they have things that just throw tokens around and it's like, hey, you want a token? You can have a token. You want a token? You can have a token too. And the CIS isn't like that, but this commander really needs token economy. Spoilers for the big game? I gave a little bit. It's going to be a big game. It's going to be fun. It's going to be different. It's a rule set that's developed by some people that we've also played with, so you'll see that, and it's my preferred way to play big games, so that's all I'm saying. I've said more, but I'm going to stop there. Pickle War. Yeah, we might have to do that. Ken and I are still finalizing what we're doing for Season 3 and 4 because we need studio space, so... It depends. I think, I don't know. I think MC-80s have an advantage because they don't have the black dice and they can stay at range. That's my thought on Pickle War. Okay, so let's now break down how this game went. Here's the setup. I have my little hard cell that's over here with all my fighters, so then Ken pretty much has to deploy everything. I have the station that I'm trying to contest right here. Ken tried to box me out, which is the right way how to do this, for deployment, so then I have to put it toward the middle. I have my Providence here and my Munificent here. Later on, I'll talk about why these ships should actually have been reversed, but you'll see that. Then Ken has his Pelta, his swarm of slow fighters, his two chargers, and then Plokun going really, really fast out to the side. Turn 1, I just pretty much drop speed, and the Providence moves slightly forward to claim the station, because all I have to do to really win the game is claim the station. And all of his stuff is going really slow as fighters, so you don't really want to fly the ships in without fighter support. And the fighters are going to take about 3 turns to get to me, so I'm going to just eat those 3 turns and take 60 points. His Acclimator, though, is flying in very, very fast. And because of that, I have to time how I'm going to be activating the Munificent so that I don't just get side-arced by, or blindsided by Acclimator coming in really, really fast and not be able to use my defense tokens. My fighters I'm just holding back because I don't want them to get picked off right away. And then we see engagement has been made. And I'm still going extremely slow, not moving really with the hard cell. The Providence is just sitting here holding points, and the Munificent is off to the side. And so this is where I would talk about how I really, really should have had the ships switched. And if you look at it, if the Munificent was here, Ken is out of position then to try to get to it, and then he would have to shoot my Providence, which is really what I want because I want to salvo him. Otherwise, he would have to try to dart in between, which would have been right into my squadron field, and then in between my 2 ships, which you don't really want to be in between 2 ships ever. So I like taking learning moments from this. Just because I won doesn't mean there isn't something to be learned from it. And looking at the way the game played out, these 2 ships switched. I might have not lost a ship then, because but then Ken would have changed his strategy, blah, blah, blah. But this would have then presented the Providence as the primary target for Ken to try to kill instead of the Munificent. And what I was talking about too, I believe it was Maxwell Silver, for his question, and basically that Ken did a really good job killing my fighters. He did. This is the turn that I chose not to engage his fighters because I knew I had about another turn before his fighters could get to me. And I thought that I had enough damage then that I could kill out the Acclimator with my fighters because they're black dice. So I have a 75% chance for it to be a hit, which doesn't ever turn into 75% hits. So as you can see, my fighters all went over here to try to attack the front of this Acclimator and did not do enough damage that I could kill it, which is frustrating. So then I'm at this point, I committed my fighters that are really Alpha Strike fighters over here, sat them in front of his stuff, and then I just let him steamroll me. The game would have been very, 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 very different if those dice came up differently in this sense, and I could have gotten more damage in and taken out the Acclimator. Because if that was the case, then he wouldn't have been able to move in and snipe me to oblivion with Ahsoka. So that was the risk reward that I had. So in my head, if I could risk the fact that I could roll decently and kill that Acclimator in this turn, then he wouldn't be able to activate it first the next turn and wipe out my squadron ball. Or I could engage him on that turn and then just try to kill it in the next turn, which probably would have been the safest bet, but I went with that risk because it was a 75% chance on each dice that it hits. Math in my head. So that I could try to kill it. It is what it is. But yeah, so I had 1 turn delay that I could have gotten the alpha on him. I gave up the alpha to try to take out a ship. And then Ken came in and cleaned me up and made me pay for that mistake. And then you can see things are happening, ships are moving, and if you go back, if you switch the Munificent and Providence, that's where the Providence wants to be, right here. Still claiming the station and being able to obliterate all these small ships in front of it, with the Munificent being a support ship out to the side. Should have switched it. So is life. And then things have disappeared, and as you can see here in this previous turn, the hard cell starts moving. And the hard cells start moving is really so that as my Providence moves past the station, the hard cell can come in behind and claim the station. Boom. Claims the station, and then at the end of the game, I can just drop this Providence because it really wasn't attacked, because that salvo is pretty scary against small ships when you're hitting them with possibly 4 damage at a time. This just drops the speed 0 to claim the station for the last turn. I can maneuver this guy out of the way of Ken's squadrons, and at this point, Ken doesn't want to commit his squadrons to getting blown up. And then his ships fly off, my ship flies off, and the Providence just sits there and holds the station. So I think that is it. Like, if we go to the end, all my squadrons are dead. Munificent is dead, but my Providence is beautifully in perfect shape. My hard cell's in pretty good shape, and I can maneuver it and I can heal him. And then we look at Ken's end of game, and I managed to kill 2 squadrons. Oh, my 8 squadrons did nothing against him because I was trying to kill his ships. And then for the most part, the 1 counselor wasn't shot at because I didn't really have good shots on it, and his Pelta just skimmed out of the way. And I'm really good at taking down all the shields on ships before I eventually kill them, which is frustrating, but that's how the game went. If you guys have any comments, throw them in. I'm gonna go over to chat now and see if you guys have posted anything else. Okay. Yes. So Max is talking about playing Gar and all their token shenanigans allows him to get rid of all the raid tokens. And yes, that is true. I'd probably say with the proper setup for Gar is one of the safer bets for using surprise attack. That and Thrawn actually is really good against surprise attack. Thrawn's like, I don't care. Is this a surprise against me or against you? It's against you. Don't do it. And then the next comment, Maxwell, arcs with Ahsoka. Their threat range is 4. Nasty. I think it's actually technically farther than 4. If you look at how the silly range ruler, every single range is different. I think range 1 is the biggest, and then range 2, so you're almost at range 5 for them when you move them and you snipe with them. So it's pretty delicious. And you just annihilate anything with counter. I'm a big counter player. I really like TIE Interceptors, as you guys have seen on the channel, and I like Tri-Fighters, so Ahsoka pretty much annihilates me in 2 of my main factions in the way I play. How can it be that I win even when Ken kills all my fighters? So let me pull up the battle score. So if you look at this game is actually really, really close when you look at what was killed. Ken killed 181 points of me, and I need to switch it over so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So as you can see here, Ken killed 181, I killed 195, but that's because I took out his flagship, which then gives me like 30-ish points of commander typically. That's why you try to kill the enemy flagship. out, and that's what makes putting Plokun on an acclimator and then speeding him in speed 3 into the sides of Providence and Munificent very, very dangerous if you can't immediately get out of it. That's one of the reasons why I committed all my fighters to trying to plink it down, because if I kill his flagship, I win the game. And then on top of that, I had 120 points of objective, which makes it a 7-4. So while my fighters, I sacrificed them to keep my ships alive, try to kill his fighters, and try to tangle his fighters up, what that ends up doing is it makes it a trading game. And as long as I kill his flagship, that's, I believe, worth just as much, if not more, than all of my fighters put together. Don't quote me on that. I will actually find out for you. I'll just quickly go to our YouTube video. If for those of you that don't know, Ken and I put in the description of every single episode our fleet builds, so that you can look directly at them. And we have our points and what our objectives are. So Ken's flagship comes to 119 points. And I have... it doesn't nicely add it up. I have 102 points of Squadrons. So if I sacrifice every single one of my Squadrons to kill Ken's flagship, I come out ahead. So that's something to consider when you're playing the game, is trading. And a lot of war games talk about the trading effect of, if you can kill X, what is it, cost. That's one of the reasons why I like Munificence, and I like them really, really lean, because it's like 77 points, and it can kill a couple small ships or do enough damage into a big ship that my ships can finish it or my fighters can finish it. So trading things up is good. Trading your fighter screen for nothing is terrible, and it almost happened that way. But when you take those into, this is gonna start spoiling into my objective, but like Contested Outpost, if you watch, I think it's in season 1, I play a really lean Thrawn list actually, and I pick as first player Contested Outpost, and I'm able to get my Star Destroyer onto the outpost with a nifty little drift on turn 1 to deny Ken any tokens. And the reason why I chose that is because I knew exactly then where Ken would have to set up to contest that outpost. And if I can contest it, he doesn't get those points. But I know where he is, and my goal is to move across the table and table him. So when you pick Contested Outpost, you have to figure out your opponent starts 120 points ahead. How can I reduce that and score enough points to go past them without losing enough of my stuff? And that's what the challenge of being first player really is when you're selecting an objective, is how fast can I kill the other opponent so that they don't get their points from their objective benefit while I'm trading my ships up. It's ideal you don't lose any of your ships, but that's not really a reality. So if I can trade my Munificent, which is 77 points, for your flagship, which is 119 points, great. If I can trade my entire fighter wing, which is like, I think we said 102 points, for your fighters being locked down, and I get the Contested Outpost, I get 120 points. I come out ahead 18 points on that trade. So that's just things to think about. That was a long rant for a short question, but it's a good question. So when Ken pulled that crit and lost his Rio shields, I heard the pain in your voice from all the times the crit ruined you. Yeah, seriously, it is. I've lost so many games, like in tournaments, from that stupid card. It was actually Worlds that it hurt me the most. Worlds taught me a lot of lessons when I went there that I try to give to you guys because I've learned the hard way. Worlds, or really the last Worlds, there was a couple main meta fleets. So you had 2-ship, which was primarily what every single Imperial was running a variation of, a Thrawn 2-ship, all aces. And then you had Rebels, which were running crazy MSU with slicer tools. And then you had Radis drops that were also running slicer tools. So basically, if you were facing Rebels, you were facing slicer tools. And I did not come prepared enough to play slicer tools. So my squadrons with my Sloan interceptor list, which is not what the meta was, even though everyone's like, oh, you're playing Sloan, it's the meta. My Sloan was very, very different than the Sloan ace list. My Sloan interceptors were actually better at killing 2-ship and better at killing Sloan aces than either of those two were. So I went in, I annihilated any Imperial player that I went against. But then I went against the Rebel players, and they would slice my Quasar like twice in the same turn. So slice it on first activation before I activate the Quasar to anything, engineering, whatever, or Confire, which is really funny on a Quasar. And then I would have to activate it because I only had 3 activations. And then they would move another transport in and then slice me again. So now my next turn is useless too, so I could never catch up. Which is one of the reasons why I started bringing that 6-point card, what is it called, Flight Commander, that allows me, before revealing a dial, I can switch to a squadron. I can switch my top dial to a squadron. And that is 6 points well invested in that meta so that I can just immediately do that. This isn't even what I'm talking about, but let's go into it. So I was facing a Rebel MSU list, and it was Dodonna, and he was ATPing my Star Destroyer. Because my Star Destroyer was sliced, it was just kind of like sitting like a lame duck in the middle of the field, and he was actually shooting into my rear and trying to get a projection misalignment. It took him 3 PTs to get it, and then he finally got it, lowered my front shields, and then just pulverized me the next turn because I had no shields anywhere. And so yeah, I lost that game. If I kept those shields, I would have been able to punch through his MC 75 and probably have pulled off a minor victory. But yeah, that projector alignment lost me that game. Oh, I hate that card. Contested outpost, yeah. Yeah, I'm still alive. Usually I go for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. We're starting to wrap up now, Joshua. When Ken wins, it's always spectacular. Been turning in a long time. It's happened quite a few times, actually. Yeah. Haven't watched all the episodes yet. Glad to hear he wins too. Yep. Ken does win. Ken's a good player. We live in this weird bubble. Ken and I talk about this all the time. That we really only play each other. So we know each other. And how we play. And Ken, thankfully, you could see in this, Ken actually knows how to use squadrons pretty well. But like, I'm a better squadron player than Ken. So if we both brought squadron like super heavy lists, I'm probably going to eke out a win because I'm a slightly better squadron player than Ken. So that makes it hard when squadrons are so dominant in the game that if we both brought squadron heavy, I'd probably win. And if he doesn't bring squadrons and I bring a squadron heavy usually crushes no squadrons. So that's why if you actually see, I try to avoid bringing squadron heavy too much. I think if you look at our last season, every time I brought squadron heavy, it was a 10-1. But that's because that's my preferred play style. Oh, this place is dry. Sorry. That's about it. This week, coming soon on Ion Radio. Give me a second and I will find out for you. I think this is going to be another Patreon fleet this coming episode. Yes, it is. It's going to be a Ramadi fleet run by Ken and a... That is not right. I think I run Kraken. Whatever my document isn't updated. So it's going to be Kraken versus Ramadi. And it's a really good game, and you should watch the entire thing, like always, and then comment on what you think of it. exactly 500, 600 point game is a better task force naval scenario. I think the game time is relatively the same. It's the squadrons that take too long. However, a fleet battle in my eyes is 800 to 1200 points. Yeah, those games though do take a long time. The squadrons just eat it up. But if you watch our final, you'll see how we have a solution for that. I keep giving you guys spoilers. I should stop doing that. Also for film time though. So actual playtime, like Ken and I can play games really, really fast. Recording games though isn't really playing games because it's recording games, and that takes a significant amount of extra time. Yeah, Ken's really good at positioning and flying. I missed a comment in here. Yeah, so sorry. Mark says, is Squadrons best at what I'm at? Yeah, I'm very good at Squadrons. I would probably say that Squadrons is one of the parts of the game that I'm best at. And then you ask what Ken's good at, and then someone answers it later on in the comments, and that is positioning. Ken is really good at positioning. Like, if you watch the games that I'm moving obstacles in front of him, trying to make him land on it, he always is able to avoid it. I land, like, if there's, like, a line of obstacles, I'm like, here we go, boys! Boom, 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 boom! And I just hit every single one of them, and Ken's, like, just nicks out of the way every single time. Gotta get back to work. Just want to say hi. Thanks for producing all the great Armada matches for us. Love the channel. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching the channel. And you're welcome to come and hang out anytime that I'm doing this, or join us in Discord and we can talk as well. Good luck at work. I think I'd rather have him buffing my fighter bombers to thin the enemy squadrons. I think that is due to Plokun. Not sure I buy Plokun being a good squadron commander. The accuracy doesn't seem to do much if you're only throwing one dice or they have dual braces. Well, really nothing has dual braces. That's like a Superstar Destroyer, an Egg fleet, and what is that? That's a Liberty. I think that's really it that has dual braces. Right? If there's another thing, let me know. Maybe is a Raider dual brace? It might be. But for the most part, it just forces them to take damage. And that's the way you should really look at it, because most things only have one redirect. And you cancel out the redirect, and then your fighters just drill straight through a ship. Especially if you link your ships up with like XI7s, which are going to drill through the shields. So then your fighters just plink, 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 and then the ship dies and has like full shields on the side. That's why Plokun's good. Or it blocks the evade, which can re-roll dice into blanks with fighters, which is extremely frustrating. So you just block the evade and here's the damage. I like running it with Y-Wings, which makes that accuracy very, very useful, because then I can trigger double hits with a crit and block your evade. So that's why I think he is good with that. And then to go into your next thing, you would rather have him as a squadron. That's why it didn't make sense to me when I was reading. He's a very expensive squadron for the GAR. And he does give counter if you don't have counter. But like for this list with Ken, he's running primarily arcs as ships, so that won't really give them a benefit. Yes, Ken, thank you. It is Ramadi versus Kraken. I don't know why in our doc that we keep track of things, it's not right. So we'll have to check into that after this episode. I'm a spoiler master. Do I need to? Am I though? Or am I just giving you enough information that you guys will turn in to see it? You never know. Years of X-Wing, that's how I can fly capital ships. That is Ken again. Good day, Nebula Bees. Nebs have dual brace and invade. Ah, yes, I forgot about the Neb Bees. That's because they're rarely seen. The accuracy doesn't really matter as much against the Neb Bee, but if you're attacking into the side and you can just automatically block the evade, that ship's dead. That's just 6 fighter attacks. Shield, hull, 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 dead. Good morning from across the sea as well. Yeah, it's been a long time. I do have a couple Neb Bs coming up that I want to play in the next season. Um, so that's something to look forward to. Yeah, I think I've talked about this before. Rebels, for the most part, are my least favorite faction. I don't really like MSU builds, and Rebels primarily are MSU. How can the accuracy give your Y-Wings a double hit? Well, Y-Wings have Bomber, so Y-Wings also roll black dice. So if you roll a hit crit on the dice with Bomber, then it's worth a hit crit, and then the accuracy just blocks out whatever token you want to cancel. So it doesn't automatically give you a hit crit. It just allows you to block out a token with your dice. So you can use it to deplete their tokens pretty easily, because for the most part, let's say if I have a full shielded ship in front of me, and I attack it with a bunch of Y-Wings in a row, and I'm rolling double hits each time, I'm probably going to say I block out your redirect. So you can either spend your brace to reduce 2 damage to 1, which is a terrible trade-off for a brace, or you take 2 damage to that hull zone. So let's just say it's a ISD. Let's not do an ISD because that has 2 redirects and blows my scenario. Let's say it's a Munificent. We'll keep with the Clone War era. So I roll up to a Munificent front. It has 4 shields on the front, 3 on the sides. And I roll a double hit. I say, I block your redirect. Take 2. Do you really want to spend that brace on that 2 damage, knowing that there's going to be a whole bunch of other squadrons coming into it? Probably not. So you're going to take 2. Now you're down to 2 shields on the front. And then I'm going to roll up again, and I'm going to roll a single hit, and I'm going to block your redirect. Now you're down to 1 shield on the front. Now we're getting dicey. And then I'm going to roll up again, and let's say I get another double. I block your redirect. You spend your brace to 1. Now you have 0 shields. Now another bomber comes in, and I just keep blocking your redirect. So if I get 1 damage, you have a choice of just taking the damage. Or if I get 2 damage, you can spend out your brace extremely quickly against 2 attack things. So you're only reducing from 2 to 1, which is a terrible trade-off. And then the next turn, you're not going to have a brace. And then my ship's going to shoot you, and you're going to not be able to brace it. Or the next turn, I just bomb you, and now you can't brace it, and you can't redirect it automatically, because I'm going to block the redirect with Plokun. So that's my thoughts on Plokun. You're very welcome. I can't need Mir PL. Thank you for turning in. Thank you for liking the videos. If you just turned in, you can watch it. We're going to probably be wrapping up in just a few minutes of me rambling. And we talk about Trench and how this last game went. Okay, so I think I'm going to call it there. I really appreciate everyone turning in and having a good conversation with Trench and other builds with me. Just our standard shout outs. Thank you to all of our Patreon members. Like we talked about, I think next week is a Patreon list. If you'd like to see a list flown, that is one of our perks for Patreon. And if you aren't already a member of our Discord, you can come join us. We have a really friendly community that's willing to help people. And we just chat about things. We talk about Legion. We talk about Battletech. We talk about Armada, all sorts of fun stuff. And turn into this next week to see our next episode, Rovechkin vs. Kraken. Until next time, I'm John. This is the Backseat Admiral, and you have been watching Ion Radio.